Hi everyone, and welcome back to my No Buy Year. In today's video, we're going to be talking about whether there's ever any original desires, or whether everything is an influenced purchase. And really, it's not even just about the purchases we make. It's about the things we believe, it's about the things we like, it's about kind of what shapes us as a human. Is it all influence? This is kind of reminding me of discussions about like nature versus nurture, what's inherent versus what's exterior. And I guess the more data and studies I see on that, the more compelling it is that the environmental factors have a bigger role than any kind of inherent or genetic factors play. And I'm not a doctor or a specialist in any of these categories, so I can't say that definitively. I don't have firsthand experience of that, but it does seem like the environment, the nurturing side of it, I guess, has more effect than we might have originally suspected. And I would like to argue that it's kind of the same for things that we want. And again, it is on my long-term plan to discuss this in a more wanting-focused way in relation to the book Wanting by Luke Burgess about mimetic desire, about how nothing we want is truly original anyway, and he's got a framework for that. So I will be touching on that in the future. But this is just kind of a thought exercise video, especially after the adventure that you might have taken yesterday. This is the second video of sales week, I believe, Thanksgiving week. Thoughts to consider maybe before you purchase whatever you might be eyeing during the sales season this week and beyond, right? It's kind of extending through December. So is it possible to even have original desires, especially when it comes to stuff that we can buy, stuff that's available for purchase? Is it truly an original desire? Is it something that's come up from needs in our life, from experiences in our life, from practical use purposes and cases in our life? Or has it been nudged? Has this thing been nudged into our peripheral vision and then possibly becoming front and center on the stage of our things that we want and things that we're looking at by exterior forces? And if we know anything about marketing at all, which I'm going to be honest, I'm not an expert in either. I'm not somebody who's ever been behind the scenes of that. But being on the other side of it now, during a year where I've tried to remove myself from falling prey to its desires, right? What marketing wants to make me do, its manipulation, I guess, I am seeing more and more that it is a constant onslaught. I've received so many mailers in just this period leading up to mid-November alone. And I don't know if it's going to get worse leading up to the weeks before Black Friday in a real sense, because I am filming a little bit in advance here, I'm going to be honest, but even so, I've been keeping the mailers, right? Even so, I have this large stack of magazines and mailers, some of which are from companies that I've not actually purchased from, that are all trying to get me to look at their wares and convince me to buy something. And I'm getting less and less fond of these practices, to be honest, especially when they make use of collecting our information and our data to try to target us with it. I think I did a chat on targeted ads after getting some feedback that some people actually prefer the targeting of the ads. I am not on that team, I'm afraid. I would rather not be suggested things to want and to buy and to add to my life and to fulfill needs that I didn't know I had until I saw the product. So I guess for the purposes of this video, I'm kind of going to be arguing that we can't really have totally original desires. Even the things on my wish list or shopping the sales list in a responsible way, again, spoiler from yesterday's video, so I guess it's not really a spoiler, but one of the things on my list of things to buy in the Black Friday sales is viola strings. And even the strings for my instrument that I use for my job are an influenced purchase. Because why do I play a stringed instrument in the first place? Well, my father taught me to do so as a child, and it became my full-time job. If I did not have the influence of him in my life, I may or may not play a stringed instrument. I might not have chosen that for myself. And maybe I would have, and maybe it would have been more original desire, but it still probably would have been the result of seeing somebody else doing that and feeling compelled to try that too. So even the utilitarian things that we're looking at have been influenced in some way. Now, there are kind of legitimate categories of things we need in life: food, shelter, clothing. However, there's still a universe of choice when it comes to the categories of food, shelter, and clothing. I've had comments and discussions in my comments about how some people prefer furnishing their homes nicely or living in nicer places, and that's, in the category of shelter, it's one of the areas of options, right? We can live in a big house or a little house, or a nice apartment or a less nice apartment, or in this area of town or in that area of town. And there's all sorts of factors acting on our decisions, all sorts of perceptions, all sorts of things that people say, all sorts of marketing that goes along with these different ways of living, different ways of having shelter. There's, how many people do you live with? Is it crazy to live with your in-laws? Like things like that. In the realms of food, I've already talked about processed food and how that's kind of a marketing nightmare as well, and an ethical kind of shambles in the video where I talked about the book Ultra Processed People. And so even something as simple as eating, something that used to be intuitive, right? We used to have the options available in nature without the industrial processing and breaking down and reconstructing of food. And now we do have that. We do have the ultra processed options that are often cheaper and more convenient and quicker to prepare, and just everywhere in society, whenever there's like a public dinner or function or gathering, there tends to be processed foods on the menu. Again, they keep for longer, they're convenient in many ways, and they've been engineered to taste great too. So even in the realms of food, where you can grow it in the ground and try to stick to what nature prepared for us, there are options. There are other ways to eat, to consume, and we've been influenced by both what's around us, maybe largely what's around us, especially in areas where it's hard to get to a grocery store that has fresh whole foods. Not Whole Foods, the grocery store. I just mean, produce, a produce section. And that's going to be harder to do if your convenient grocery store is more of a convenience store that has maybe your milk and your bread and your processed foods and maybe one bowl of bananas on the counter. So it's not totally up to our inherent desires even for what we want to eat. There are forces beyond our control that are pushing us towards choices. And then clothing has been massively taken by these industries of marketing and choice as far as something that we need versus something that we choose as far as styles, trends, expressions, how we adorn ourselves, how much or how little we choose to wear even can be a choice of judgment, something we perceive in a judgy way for various reasons. I mean, some of it's just that if you're not wearing very many clothes in the seasons of December and January in the Northern Hemisphere, you might be freezing your you-know-what's off. And the conversation of clothing being a need and a want is going to come up possibly multiple times on this channel, maybe in dedicated chats. So I am either going to be opening the door here, or maybe it's already come up. But I do think that's one of the reasons that clothing has been a tricky category for me, because it is something that we need to wear. We can't just go out with no clothing in the same ways that we can go with no makeup, right? Makeup is not a need. A lot of people don't wear makeup in everyday life. It might have been traditionally gendered as far as, a lot of male people don't choose to wear makeup in today's society, especially older ones. And a lot of female people have been heavily marketed makeup in, kind of decades past, especially. But it's a choice. It's seen as a choice by society. Even if there's a perception that certain people should wear it, it's still kind of a choice. And if somebody says you have to wear it, that's not really seen as a positive thing. It's not the same with clothing. We have to wear clothes. We can't just go out nude. And we do have to have some kind of variance for the temperature, the climate we live in, and the level of formality of our workplace. And in some cases, there is a dress code. There's often a dress code for public schools as well. There's some exterior standards that influence how we choose our clothes. And then on top of that is all of the trends and the styles and the artistic expression, and the list goes on. But again, I do think I'm going to do a dedicated video on why clothing has been so hard for me to break up with. And the categories like makeup have been very easy for me to break up with. Categories like homeware, categories where the needs are more obviously not needs. There's no functional need to have a throw pillow or a nice blanket if you already have something that fulfills that purpose. Supporting your back, and one blanket is enough. The trend of a blanket is not going to impact how warm it keeps you. So anyway, back to influenced purchases and whether what we want and what we're buying has been influenced. If we just say that yes, it's inevitably influenced in some way, the question then becomes, are we happy with this possible evidence of influence in our lives? I did a video talking about the clothing that I'm embarrassed to wear because I've been influenced to buy it in maybe obvious or more overt ways to the people that kind of know, and kind of contrasting that with what makes me proud to wear something, the positive influences. If I have a shirt from my favorite band or whatever, that's something I would consider a positive representation, a positive influence, something that says something deeper about me than just the surface level clothing. or the fact that I might be consuming fashion content online, which is not something I would consider deep and meaningful about me. So does the evidence of influence, the possible evidence of influence, please you or make you internally cringe a little bit? Is it a positive representation? So, other sources of positive representation might be if you were influenced by your family. Maybe not when you're a teenager and you kind of cringe about doing what your dad did, like me playing violin. But as I am now a more mature adult, I can think that that's a lovely thing to have passed down to me. He passed his skill set down so that I can make my living doing what he did and still does, and maybe have a little bit of a head start to where he came from, having started later in life than I did. So I can see that, it's a really lovely thing that he tried to do for me and did for me by passing that skill set down. And I can see that as an influence that I'm now proud to have. And as somebody with British and Asian parents, I still kind of cringe at saying that out loud. It's a little bit too sentimental and too kind of openly loving of one's family, but there we are. And then, friends and pop culture that you actively engage with, like I was saying with the band t-shirts, or even, I have graphic tees with art on them, like Van Gogh, and I've seen other ones, Debussy, Matisse, examples in the culture that you identify with on a personal level. And in comes the conversation about the teenagers wearing shirts with Nirvana on them and not knowing a single song of that band or whatever. And, at that point, it's maybe not evidence of deep influence. So it's not, you can't take it as a given that somebody deeply engages in whatever they're wearing or however they present themselves. But it can be an indication of deeper involvement, and it can open the door for that kind of discourse and conversation if you are a Nirvana fan and whoever's wearing the shirt is a Nirvana fan, and you can have that kind of discussion and talk and connection with them based on the greater body of work of that artist. So I guess the questions I want to leave you with for today is, what is your model of desire? Where did your influence come from to want whatever it is that's currently on your wish list that you might be thinking of buying during the sales season or just any time? Why do you want this thing? Is it a positive representation for you? Is it a positive association? Do you think it will become a regret because maybe the association or the influence was not intrinsic and, as intrinsic as it can possibly be? If your model of desire was an influencer online who earns money from peddling products, I think the other question that is helpful to ask is, do you want to be like that influencer? Assuming that they actually use these products in their everyday life, which I do think many of them do. I don't think it's entirely a sham as far as recommending things that they don't actually use. I think in some cases, sure, but in other cases, there are some influencers out there who are kind of more judicious in recommending only things that they truly actually like and use. So let's say best case scenario, it's one of those. Do you actually want to be like this model of desire, this influencer? Because by using what they use and taking their recommendations, you are kind of assuming a level of similarity. And it's important to consider this in a practical way. So I have countless examples in my history of being influenced by things. But because I just talked about makeup recently, I will use one of those. I've seen multiple influencers talk about how they like a lip oil as a product. And I do not like a lip oil at all, right? It's not my preferred formula or utility of product, right? I don't like the feeling of it. I don't like the color. I don't like how it looks. There's nothing really that I like about it. And when I was influenced to purchase these, I was not really thinking, do I have the same practical use as that person for this product? Do I like makeup in the same way that they do? Do I wear makeup in the same way that they do? It's not just about, do I want to be like that person? It's a much more specific question than that. If I just operate on the knee-jerk of, do I want to be like that person? The answer might be yes. But in what regards? In what aspects? And is buying the lip product that they might use gonna bring me closer to the aspects of that person that I want to be like, right? So it's not necessarily killing the parasocial relationship, although it is important to know that it's not a real relationship, right? A parasocial relationship is not a two-way street. Even in a community like mine where I do engage with my comments 100% of the time. Right now, I can say that with the size of my channel and the amount of comment discussions I have. But even in this situation, my everyday life is not really up for observation, and we can't really have a two-way discussion of our life philosophies. I do my best to communicate clearly on here, And I really appreciate it when people ask questions instead of make assumptive judgments and, open the door for dialogue, because that's as two-way as this can possibly be. But especially with larger influencers who are doing the sponsorships, making money from affiliate links, this is often not the case. It's not as two-way as is possible to be online. And it's important for us as the people on the other side of that window, the one-way window, to look at our lives as well, see the reflection and evaluate, do I want to be like this person as far as using this product that they're recommending? Like, will this bring me closer to the aspects of this person that I admire, if I admire aspects, or the goals that I'm trying to reach, if there are goals that seem to be common? And is this product going to serve that? And in my case, this product really didn't serve that. And any aesthetic aspects, any surface level aspects are not getting to the core of why we need and use stuff. So I can even looking at myself in the viewfinder here, holding this kind of designed packaging of this makeup, it looks nice. It looks objectively kind of pretty. And I've talked about this before in relation to this specific product, and it kind of gives me an aesthetic, right? If I just hold this here. But that is not something that I want to place importance on. And I don't want to sell this product to you. In fact, if anything, I don't like this, right? I don't like this product. I don't recommend it. And if you want to know more about that, you can leave a comment and I'll tell you more and try to de-influence you from buying this unless it really does serve your life. But there are makeup people out there to maybe show you the product better than I am able to, although they might be influencing you to buy it. They might try to sell it to you. So I'm going to put this down and move on. Dangerous territory. But all of that to say, buying a product that you see somebody using and talking positively about is probably not going to bring you closer to the ways you want to relate to that person, even if it is a parasocial relationship online, especially in the parasocial relationships online. And if we're trying to support the career of an influencer, there are usually always going to be a much more direct way to do that. Right? So if we're going to spend $10, $20, $30 on a lip product in order to support their career, we can probably donate that $20 to their Patreon or whatever it is, other channels that they have of support in a more direct way. We can comment on their videos. We can engage with them in the ways that are free and available to us through consuming the ads on the media, right? So they're not even totally free. But the notion of wanting to support an influencer's career is something that I now realize is totally ludicrous as well, as far as justifying the purchase of the things that they're talking about. And I think it's that element of being able to justify as well that is dangerous, because when we see something pretty like that and we think, oh, if I buy this, they'll be able to continue to do what they're doing because their sponsorships are succeeding and whatever. That's not really a positive engagement in my now view of the matter. It's not the way to provide the most support either. I think having thoughtful dialogues both in the communities of the influencers, as well as with possibly in real life people, sharing the content that the influencer is creating in a meaningful way, is actually the much better way, the ideal way to support the work of an influencer online. Kind of bring it into your real life, if that makes sense. And it's kind of hypocritical for me to say that actually, because I haven't brought my influencing into my real life very much. I have a couple of friends that I now have told about it and talk about it occasionally with, but as a whole, it's not really part of my general life presence yet. But I think it might become that way for next year. We'll see. I'll check back in on that as things unfold. But I guess the other thing about supporting influencers through the sales, I would actually argue that that's the least responsible part about the job of influencing, and that's the part that I now really don't want to support and encourage more of, right? I don't want to encourage more sponsorships or product affiliations or kind of brand deals in that regard, because a lot of the brand deals with influencers are not high-value products. They are preying on the parasocial relationship and the kind of more guaranteed aspect of sales because of that community wanting to support their favorite influencer in kind of like a celebrity status way. So anyway, back to the thesis of this video. Look at your wish list for the sales season or just life in general and ask yourself, what was the influence that made you want to purchase this thing? Because there will be some kind of influence. And if it's a positive one, if it's one that serves you in real life, if it's one that you can be proud of, I guess for me, there's like two categories, right? There's the products that are purely utilitarian, where, you know, in the case of the viola strings, in the case of the laptop sleeve or whatever, I have utilitarian purposes for that, and I'm prepared to stand behind those, right? I need the new strings to sound better on my instrument. I need the tablet case to protect my tablet from being in my bag and people seeing a tablet and maybe stealing it. And obviously I'm going to try to take other measures to prevent theft from my personal belongings, right? Keep them in eyesight and all that. But even so, the protective elements of a case are something I'm prepared to stand behind. And I'm also not going for like a tablet case with a Chanel logo or something stupid like that. So no judgments if you have a Chanel tablet case. Again, I'm slipping into casual talk here a little bit. It's making judgment calls on your choice of brands, whatever. Anyway, those are utilitarian. And then for the more fanciful purchases, is there a connection that you're proud of, that gives you the warm and fuzzies of, you know, like, are you buying this specific sweatshirt with the Debussy La Mer on it because you have a special musical connection to that piece? And it might not be utilitarian, but when you explain that to somebody, they learn something more about you, the inner you, in a way that you kind of feel harmony with, at peace with, and are proud of, for lack of a better term, lack of a better way to contextualize that. So that's the thought I'll leave you with today. And I would love to hear your stories about this one in the comments. I would love to hear your influences for having and using and buying and wanting specific things, whether they're positive or negative for you in your life. I would love to hear your stories. I feel like this is one of those topics that can get really personal and interesting and say a lot of nice things about us as people. And as long as we don't let the consumer aspect of it get out of hand, I think it can help us be a lot more conscious about what we choose to bring into our lives. We're also not trying to fixate on it too much either, right? Like if we need something for utilitarian purposes, we don't need to keep on looking until we find that perfect one that represents us to its ideal form, right? Like there's two sides to this coin. And maybe I kind of neglected that kind of darker side to the coin as well. But it's just about asking the question today. And before I go down too many more rabbit holes, I will bid you farewell. And I will see you tomorrow. And bye for now.